Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to be a top 10 best books of the year. So first and foremost I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody and I hope that you have a wonderful new year. It is the 27th, 28th when I'm filming this. So Christmas has been and gone, but I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. And I hope that 2023 brings you everything that you want in your bookish lives, your personal lives, and your work lives. And I just want to also apologise for not producing frequent videos at the moment. The latter half of this year was incredibly busy and I just didn't get any time to film. Luckily I had plenty of time this year to read, and I have read more books this year than I did last year. And I also managed to complete all of the BookTube prize reading this year, which I'm really pleased about because it was near the knuckle in some categories, but we got there. So I'm hoping to do the BookTube prize next year, and so I will be producing wrap-up videos for those. And I also have one more year of my masters left, which will be the dissertation year this year, so hopefully in between that long extended project I'll be able to film more videos, because some of my assignments this year, they were module based and those 11 weeks were just rushing by, and I was finding that I had to just kind of knuckle down to keep on top of the workload, so that meant less videos as well. So anyway, I decided today that I would write down a list of some of my favourite books of this year, my top 10 favourites, and then I will do a video of my top 10 worst books. But as I will explain in that video a little bit more about them, I wouldn't class them as worst. They were just either disappointing or just not as good as some of the others, so I don't want to dampen any author's work by saying they're the worst, but we'll talk about that in the next video. For this video we're just going to focus on the top 10. So I had loads of 5-star reads this year, a lot more than last year, and I found it quite hard to narrow this down to 10. So there are quite a few books this year that I would have put on special recommendations or just missed out on top 10, but I just felt like that would be a lot of work, so I want to slowly ease myself into producing videos again because it's been a good few months. So I'm just going to concentrate on these 10. There might be a few missing that people who follow me on Goodreads might be confused or question why they didn't make it into the top 10. I think anything that got a 4 or a 4.5 I've not put in this list. There are a few 5 stars that are also not in this list. I just had to do a top 10, and it was my first day back at work today, so over my lunch break I really pondered what my top 10 would be, and these are the ones I've come up with. So on the fly, this is this video. So most of the books on this list are quite dark in tone and in theme. It seems like a lot of the darker books I find, when they're done really well, I just instantly kind of get that 5-star reaction with. So a lot of them are quite similar in that they are dark horror thriller books. I usually just class these as thrillers, but some of these books I've noticed that other booktubers have categorised as potential horror. So that is a genre that I'm wanting to explore more next year, because I find a lot of the grittier dark thrillers are the ones I'm drawn to. So possibly I will expand a bit more into horror novels next year. But I might do a little video of my reading plans and what I want to achieve next year and where I want to explore further with my reading life, as I have a few loose reading goals that I'd like to achieve, like reading resolutions in different genres and things like that. So I might do a little video on that. So comment down below if you would like me to do that video, and I can plan that for you and put that up in the next few weeks. So anyway, so the first book I am going to talk about is one of the only lighter hearted, lighter themed books in this category, and that is Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. So I read this book earlier in the year for the BookTube Prize, and I remember loving it when I read it. So it's quite a long, hefty, sweeping family saga, and I listened to it on audio, and I think it was about 24 hours on audiobook, so it was quite lengthy, but it's just a story that you kind of get lost in. And I am aware that this is going to be part of a series. Now, I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy, or there's going to be more books, but I think there's going to be at least 3. So this is the one that's going to kick the series off. And this follows the Hildebrandt family. And this is set in 1970s America. And it's focused on a town called New Prospects. And the family all moved to New Prospects, and there is kind of a church community there. The father of the family, Russ, is a pastor, and he's trying to connect with this youth group within the community. And he has a wife, Marion, and it's basically the micro dramas of their lives as a family and also their own internal personal issues. So Russ is dealing with a tempting parishioner who he kind of fancies, and he is trying to navigate whether she fancies him as well and what that would mean. Marion tries to contact an old flame who she thought that there was always something there with, because she thinks that Russ is cheating on her. And when she meets this old flame again, it's not quite the dynamic she remembers. Becky has a relationship with a boy in the community that goes to the youth group called Tanner, and it's that relationship there. Perry starts to have issues with drugs. Clem wants to join up and go to Vietnam. Jetson, the youngest, is kind of not neglected, but his storyline isn't really as well developed in this book, and potentially it might be developed further in the series. So it spans a lengthy amount of time from them joining New Prospects to kind of, we end the book with the eldest children of the family maturing and going on to the next steps. And then the next book on this list is The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. So this is my first Simone St. James book, and I know that this one isn't as heavily or well regarded as the other Simone St. James novels. However, I was really pleasantly surprised by this book. So it's set in 2 different time periods. So it's set in the 1970s and then the 2017 perspective. So this follows Shia, who is a receptionist by day and by night, an amateur true crime sleuth who goes on the internet and tries to crack cold cases. She's become very interested in a case that happened 40 years earlier in the same community, where a lady called Beth Greer was accused of murdering her family. And she decides that she wants to go and interview Beth Greer and find out more about this case. And then we have the 1970s timeline, where it goes through Beth Greer's arrest and sentencing and how she's claiming that she's innocent of these crimes. And then we also have this strange kind of paranormal element throughout the novel that I think was done really well. Really liked the true crime element. I'm really excited to read more Simone St. James. And then the next one is The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. This was a Kindle Unlimited book. I really got into Kindle Unlimited this year. I decided to take the plunge and subscribe to the membership, and I've never looked back since. This book was on my radar for a long time, and this was one of the first Kindle Unlimited books that I started reading this year, and I just could not put it down. So this follows a couple in America who, in kind of contemporary times, who both work at the hospital, and they the wife is a nurse and she's on a late shift, and she finds out that there is a child that they found just abandoned in a parking lot, who seems very young, who seems quite traumatised. So they take her to the hospital, they check her all over, they find out she's a lot older than they expected, but because she's severely malnourished, she just looks a lot younger. And they realise that no one's going to come and claim her. She seems to be completely abandoned. So the couple have been trying for a child, and they decide that they are going to adopt her. And then it's one of those fantastic creepy thrillers. I love creepy, unnerving kids. I read The Push by Ashley Audrain, and it's very similar, so if you liked that, you'll love this. But this book goes a little bit darker in terms of the girl-child not being quite right. In The Push, it's a lot more literary and it's suggested there's something not right, but we also heavily question the mother in that novel. In this, it's very apparent that there is a level of evil in this child, and everybody who spends an extended period of time with the child gets that, apart from the husband, who she seems to play against the wife, and in front of other people she's besotted with the husband, only not to spend time with him, and then she's an absolute nightmare when she's alone with the wife. And he doesn't want to give up on her, he feels really bad about it, but this child is just all kinds of levels of messed up. Like, she bites people, she hurts animals, she's just a horrible child. So it was fantastic in a dark way to read about this and the unfolding, and knowing the inevitable disaster that would happen to this couple by trying to keep her, even though it was becoming more and more obvious that she was just beyond help. It was just really fun to read. The next one is The Housemaid by Frieda McFadden, and this is kind of a similar tone to some of these other thrillers. So this follows a lady who's come out of prison and she's desperate for a job, and she can't even get a job at a fast food restaurant. No one will employ her. And she goes for a job as a nanny, and she thinks she's definitely not got the job, even though she seemed to have a good rapport with the lady who owns the house. And then she gets a phone call saying, when can you start? It's a live-in position. And this is perfect because this woman's been living out of her car because she just can't find anywhere to rent. And as she takes on the job, she realises that the child that she's looking after isn't particularly nice. She doesn't like her, the feeling is mutual, they have no connection, and she's more of a chore to look after. But then she starts finding out that the mother of the house, Nina, is starting to act very erratically. She's giving her impossible tasks, she's shouting at her over trivial things, it seems like she's setting her up to fail in certain tasks. And the lovely lady who invited her into the house has just gone, and this monster is replacing her, ordering her to do these things and setting her up all the time. And she ends up getting close to the husband in the house, who seems like Prince Charming. He deals with Nina's erratic behaviour, he's very attentive to his daughter. We find out the daughter's not biologically his, but he loves her and he plays with her, and they have the perfect setup. And the girl is confused why he puts up with his wife and the things that she does. She seems to act crazy in front of everybody, and he kind of always makes excuses for her behaviour. So then the girl and the husband end up having an affair, and he kicks the wife out. And then it's only when the wife leaves the house, begrudgingly, that the story opens up a little bit. And I don't want to spoil anything, because I think this is a trope that's been done quite a lot in thrillers. I've read already a few this year that have the exact same format. It's part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1, the introduction of the character, part 2, the change of the dynamic, and part 3, the twist. So I don't really want to spoil it, but I found that it was really propulsive. And this was the first one of that trope that I'd seen done. So I thought it had been done particularly well. The next one is The Quarry Girls by Jess Lourey. So this is set in Minnesota in 1977, and I didn't realise that a lot of these books have a 1970s America theme, but it's quite interesting because the more I go through these books, that seems to be a theme that's developed, which I had no inkling of. But anyway, Heather, a young girl, is growing into adolescence in a hot summer with her best friends Brenda and Maureen. And then there's a kind of friend called Claude who kind of is her best pal, but they don't realise they've always kind of been in love with each other. So that's a little strand of the story that develops in a very cute way. The story is not cute, it's dark. So one of her friends goes missing and then turns up dead, and another resident called Beth, who's a local who works at the diner, also goes missing. In Pantown, where they live, people bury their secrets. The girl realises there's a seedy side to the town as well. She finds out that one of her friends is being groomed by men in the community, particularly by people of authority in the community, the sheriff and other authoritarian individuals. And this goes unchecked, and she reflects back on this now that her friend has gone missing. About how problematic that is and how she's going to find the truth about what happened to her friend when these adults in this community have really big secrets to hide. So the development of that was really interesting. Her second friend goes missing, and then she's on the hunt to find out what happened to them and whether she can save them, and Beth, who's gone missing as well. I just think this was really well structured and done, and this again, I remember just flipping the pages. I just couldn't wait to find out the secrets and find out if any of the girls could be saved. I just think going into it, you should know that it's not all high action, high murder, high thriller tropes. I felt there was a lot more development of the characters in the community, and the quest for truth, whether the truth wanted to be acknowledged or not, kind of thing. So the next one is The First Days of Spring by Nancy Tucker, and I would argue this is the darkest book on the list. This is the book that I would caveat by saying, if you find anything to do with child murderers particularly triggering, please don't pick this book up. Here in the UK we have some very infamous cases. The most prominent and the most obvious here in the UK is the Jamie Bulger killers, which were two boys who murdered a toddler, and they were both aged 10. And it was pretty horrific how that poor boy met his end, and for a lot of people in this country it's just not a place that people can go to or feel comfortable going there at all. So I just want to please stress, please don't pick that up if you know that sensitive topic area is just going to be too much for you, because it does go there, it really does go there. So this follows a character called Chrissy, and she's 8 years old, and at the beginning of the book we know that she has murdered another child in her community. Now her community is incredibly poor. The house that she killed him in was kind of an abandoned house. It's called the Alleyways, and there's an extreme level of poverty there. And there's a lot of neglect of children. Chrissy is particularly, out of people in that community, extremely neglected. Her father's in and out of prison. Her mother is an alcoholic and she barely acknowledges her presence. So she's often not having proper meals. She's incredibly malnourished. She's not eating for long periods of time. She's getting no attention. She's getting a lot of emotional neglect. She tries to cling to her friends and their parents for meals, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. And Chrissy's grown up with this very cold, calculated, manipulative streak as a survival mechanism. So it's very hard to read about Chrissy, particularly because a lot of the book is from her perspective as an 8-year-old and then her perspective as an adult, kind of post her institution. where she's raising a child of her own. Written as an 8-year-old would speak and understand language and understand narrative, but the way she talks about how she manipulates other children of her age to get sweeties or to get them to play tricks, and this kind of anger and pain she feels at the neglect that her mum doesn't seem to care and her dad flits in and out of her life. It's kind of painful to read about, because ultimately you can sympathise with how Chrissy as a monster is formed, and while we don't want culpability for these people in society, ultimately she's been let down by many people. And it kind of goes into that further on in the novel that you get when they eventually find out that she killed not just one child, but we find out later on another one, and she goes to trial and she's finally caught. A lot of the mums talk about how dislikable she was as a child, but ultimately how the community let her down. So it's a very conflicting novel. And then we go to Chrissy in present day, where she's left. She ended up having to spend some time at a youth institution. She comes out and she gets pregnant and she raises a daughter of her own, and we learn about how she reflects on the things that she did as a child when as an adult she's trying to protect her child, and we understand that she loves her daughter and she's trying to protect her, but then we're also hearing about these very difficult things that she did as a child. And I thought it was just so powerful and so cleverly done, and Chrissy's voice as an adult and a child are just polar opposites, but so believable. And like I said, you kind of, part of you feels this absolute disgust at what Chrissy did, but equally you feel the pain of what she went through as a child, and that kind of shaped her. It's just so well done. I don't think any of the other novels kind of blew my socks off in the same way as this one. I like to describe Chrissy as the wrong side of Shuggie Bain, in my opinion. She had the kind of similar upbringing as Shuggie. She had that horrible level of poverty, she had an alcoholic parent, she had immense neglect, and where Shuggie Bain is the character that we all want to kind of cuddle and we want to give him the best in life, and he broke our heart throughout that novel. Chrissy breaks our heart in a different way, and she's a character that will really stick with me. The next one I have is Keep in the Family by John Mars. This has had some mixed reviews since it came out on Kindle Unlimited. It came out towards the latter half of this year, and as soon as I could download it I did and started reading it. But I actually found it was really propulsive. I was really interested to know what on earth was going on. This follows Finn and Maya, who are married and they have a newborn baby, and they move into a house that their parents, Finn's parents, owned, Deborah and David, and they find in the attic a suitcase that has a body in it, and this becomes an investigation of who the body is, why it's in the attic, what's going on. Then links to murders that occurred in the 1970s and 80s, and this body becomes connected to that, and Maya and her baby and her husband get dragged into this story. People have a lot of secrets, and it has this kind of trope of history repeating itself and parents kind of grooming their children to keep secrets, and also I kind of liked the dark element of the suitcases. And then the next one I've got is The Good Lie by A.R Torre. Again, a lot of people don't love some of A.R Torre's other books, but this one is the most highly regarded by the community, and this was available on Kindle Unlimited. And this follows psychiatrist Dr. Gwen Moore, who is an expert on killers. When her client John and his wife die on the same day, Gwen ends up trying to hide her connection to John because he admitted in therapy that he wanted to kill his wife, and now they think he might be the bloody heart killer that the police are trying to find. And then there's this interesting relationship between her and one of the police detectives, who's really interested in cracking this case. They start this bit of on-off romance, but it's not sickening romance, don't worry. But he's got secrets to hide as well. Kind of, if you like kind of criminal profiling, psychiatry, true crime, this is a thriller but that goes into those elements, and that was really fun. And then I have Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This was one of the most visceral kind of hand in my mouth reading situation for me. So this follows a lady who marries this man who seems absolutely perfect, and he wants to take care of her, give her the life of luxury, and he has told her that when the time comes, her disabled sister can come and live with them. And everybody in the community thinks he's amazing. He couldn't do enough for her. She has the perfect life. But behind closed doors, he controls everything she does in a very sinister way, and she's determined for her sister to not come and live with them because she doesn't think it will end well. She thinks that her husband might be quite cruel to her sister. And this is the first kind of story that had that trope for me of everything looking perfect on the outside but controlling husband in the inside. And I have read quite a few, particularly in the last couple of months of that, and this did it very well. I know this book wasn't released this year. It was a bit of an older thriller, and the ending is really clever. Yeah, it was such a claustrophobic read, but if you really like those domestic thrillers and, you know, the husband really having all this money but actually being a horrible person, you will like this. And then last but not least, the last 5-star on my last in my top 10 is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. Now this book was that clever that I ended up having to Google the ending after I read this because I had no idea, and it was very much it felt very much like when I watched Shutter Island for the first time, that you kind of needed someone to give you a little bit of help to explore that ending, and then when you realise how clever the ending is, you kind of just want to reread the whole book again, and then you will get it with the hindsight of knowing. So all those little twists and reveals and little clusters of clues you would get. But essentially on the surface it's a story of a girl going to meet her boyfriend's family. She's on a road trip with him and she's thinking of ending the relationship and she doesn't know how to go about it. She just doesn't feel like he's that person for her, and they're having like this conversation in the car. And literally most of the book, I would say about, I think it's got like 10 chapters and 7 of them are just those two in the car. And then when they get there, and then the ending, but it's one of those books where you just can't say anything because you don't want to ruin it, where things are not quite as they seem and you are lulled as a reader into a false sense of security the whole way along. So anyway, it's like an incredibly short book, so I would highly recommend, if you haven't read it, just to read it, and it's so good. So I would highly recommend. So that's everything. I'm really sorry for this really waffly video, but I find it hard to talk about these books concisely. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.